Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection comes from chapter 348. Chapter 348. The conversation at supper was not about politics or societies, but turned on the subject Nicholas liked best, recollections of 1812. Denisov started these, and Pierre was particularly agreeable and amusing about them. The family separated on the most friendly terms. After supper, Nicholas, having undressed in his study and given instructions to the steward who had been waiting for him, went to the bedroom in his dressing gown, where he found his wife still at her table, writing. "What are you writing, Mary?" Nicholas asked. Countess Mary blushed. She was afraid that what she was writing would not be understood or approved by her husband. She had wanted to conceal what she was writing from him, but at the same time was glad he had surprised her at it, and that she would now have to tell him. "A diary, Nicholas," she replied, handing him a blue exercise book filled with her firm, bold writing. "A diary," Nicholas repeated with a shade of irony, and he took up the book. It was in French. December 4th. Today, when Andrusha, her eldest boy, woke up, he did not wish to dress, and Mademoiselle Louise sent for me. He was naughty and obstinate. I tried threats, but he only grew angrier. Then I took the matter in hand. I left him alone and began, with nurse's help, to get up the other children, telling him that I did not love him. For a long time he was silent, as if astonished. Then he jumped out of bed, ran to me in his shirt, and sobbed so that I could not calm him for a long time. It was plain that what troubled him most was that he had grieved me. Afterwards in the evening, when I gave him his ticket, he again began crying piteously and kissing me. One can do anything with him by tenderness. "What is a ticket?" Nicholas inquired. "I have begun giving the elder ones marks every evening, showing how they have behaved." Nicholas looked into the radiant eyes that were gazing at him, and continued to turn over the pages and read. In the diary was set down everything in the children's lives that seemed noteworthy to their mother, as showing their characters or suggesting general reflections on educational methods. They were for the most part quite insignificant trifles, but did not seem so to the mother or the father either, now that he read this diary about his children for the first time. Under the date 5th was entered, "Mitya was naughty at table. Papa said he was to have no pudding. He had none, but looked so unhappily and greedily at the others while they were eating. I think that punishment by depriving children of sweets only develops their greediness. Must tell Nicholas this." Nicholas put down the book and looked at his wife. The radiant eyes gazed at him questioningly. Would he approve or disapprove of her diary? There could be no doubt not only of his approval, but also of his admiration for his wife. Perhaps it need not be done so pedantically, thought Nicholas, or even done at all, but this untiring, continual spiritual effort, of which the sole aim was the children's moral welfare, delighted him. Had Nicholas been able to analyze his feelings, he would have found that his steady, tender, and proud love of his wife rested on his feeling of wonder at her spirituality, and at the lofty moral world, almost beyond reach, in which she had her being. He was proud of her intelligence and goodness, recognized his own insignificance beside her in the spiritual world, and rejoiced all the more that she with such a soul not only belonged to him, but was part of him. "I quite approve, my dearest," said he with a significant look, and after a short pause he added, "And I behaved badly today. You weren't in the study. We began disputing. Pierre and I lost my temper. But he is impossible. Such a child. I don't know what would have become of him if Natasha didn't keep him in hand. Have you any idea why he went to Petersburg? They have formed—" "Yes, I know," said Countess Mary. "Natasha told me." "Well then, you know," Nicholas went on, growing hot at the mere recollection of their discussion. "He wanted to convince me that it is every honest man's duty to go against the government, and that the oath of allegiance and duty— I'm sorry, you weren't there. They all fell on me, Denisov and Natasha. Natasha is absurd. How she rules over him. And yet, there need only be a discussion, and she has no words of her own, but only repeats his sayings," added Nicholas, yielding to that irresistible inclination which tempts us to judge those nearest and dearest to us. He forgot that what he was saying about Natasha could have been applied word for word to himself in relation to his own wife. "Yes, I have noticed that," said Countess Mary. "When I told him that duty and the oath were above everything, he started proving goodness knows what. A pity you were not there. What would you have said?" "As I see it, you were quite right, and I told Natasha so. Pierre says everybody is suffering, tortured, and being corrupted, and that it is our duty to help our neighbor. Of course he is right there," said Countess Mary. "But he forgets that we have other duties nearer to us, duties indicated to us by God himself, and that though we might expose ourselves to risks, we must not risk our children." "Yes, that's it. That's just what I said to him," put in Nicholas, who fancied he really had said it. But they insisted on their own view, love of one's neighbor and Christianity, and all this in the presence of young Nicholas, who had gone into my study and broke all my things. "Ah, Nicholas, do you know, I am often troubled about little Nicholas," said Countess Mary. "He is such an exceptional boy. I am afraid I neglect him in favor of my own. We all have children and relations, while he has none. He is constantly alone with his thoughts." "Well, I don't think you need to reproach yourself on his account. All that the fondest mother could do for her son you have done and are doing for him, and of course I am glad for it. He is a fine lad, a fine lad. This evening he listened to Pierre in a sort of trance, and fancy, as we were going to supper, I looked, and he had broken everything on my table to bits, and he told me of it himself at once. I never knew him to tell an untruth. A fine lad, repeated Nicholas, who at heart was not fond of Nicholas Bolkonsky, but was always anxious to recognize that he was a fine lad. "Still, I am not the same as his own mother," said Countess Mary. "I feel I am not the same, and it troubles me. A wonderful boy, but I am dreadfully afraid for him. It would be good for him to have companions." "Well, it won't be for long. Next summer I'll take him to Petersburg," said Nicholas. "Yes, Pierre always has been a dreamer, and always will be," he continued, returning to the talk in the study which had evidently disturbed him. "Well, what business is it of mine what goes on there, whether a Rakiachiv is bad and all that? What business was it of mine when I married and was so deep in debt that I was threatened with prison, and had a mother who could not see or understand it? And then there are you and the children and our affairs. Is it for my own pleasure that I am at the farm or in the office from morning to night? No, but I know I must work to comfort my mother, to repay you, and not to leave the children such beggars as I was." Countess Mary wanted to tell him that man does not live by bread alone, and that he attached too much importance to these matters. But she knew she must not say this, and that it would be useless to do so. She only took his hand and kissed it. He took this as a sign of approval and a confirmation of his thoughts, and after a few minutes' reflection, continued to think aloud. "You know, Mary, today Elias Mitrofanovich," this was his overseer, "came back from the Tambov estate and told me that they are already offering 80,000 rubles for the forest." And with an eager face, Nicholas began to speak of the possibility of repurchasing Otradano before long, and added,
Another 10 years of life, and I shall leave the children in an excellent position. Countess Mary listened to her husband and understood all that he told her. She knew that when he thought aloud in this way, he would sometimes ask her what he had been saying, and be vexed if he noticed that she had been thinking about something else. But she had to force herself to attend, for what he was saying did not interest her at all. She looked at him and did not think, but felt about something different. She felt the submissive, tender love for this man, who would never understand all that she understood, and this seemed to make her love for him still stronger, and added a touch of passionate tenderness. Besides this feeling, which absorbed her altogether and hindered her from following the details of her husband's plans, thoughts that had no connection with what he was saying flitted about through her mind. She thought of her nephew. Her husband's account of the boy's agitation while Pierre was speaking struck her forcibly, and various traits of his gentle, sensitive character recurred to her mind. And while thinking of her nephew, she thought also of her own children. She did not compare them with him, but compared her feeling for them with her feeling for him, and felt with regret that there was something lacking in her feeling for young Nicholas. Sometimes it seemed to her that this difference arose from the difference in their ages, but she felt herself to blame toward him, and promised in her heart to do better and to accomplish the impossible, and this life to love her husband, her children, little Nicholas, and all her neighbors, as Christ loved mankind. Countess Mary's soul always strove toward the infinite, the eternal, and the absolute, and could therefore never be at peace. A stern expression of the lofty, secret suffering of a soul burdened by the body appeared on her face. Nicholas gazed at her. "Oh God, what will become of us if she dies, as I always fear when her face is like that," thought he, and placing himself before the icon, he began to say his evening prayers. All right, so that concludes my reading of chapter 348. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. This one's going to have a lot of mispronunciations, so get ready, guys. A Year of War and Peace, day 348. Remember the 50 names. Many years ago, when the earth was old and the world was new, a tale of creation flowered in wisdom alongside the rivers of Babylon. This ancient tale, the Enuma Elish, tells the story of how the great Marduk gives birth to the world through righteous battle with the gods. In the story, Marduk forms the earth and the sky from the battered body of the vanquished god, Tiamat. He then populates his creation with the sun, moon, stars, and planets. Finally, Marduk summons mankind into existence from the spilled blood of Tiamat's husband, Kingu. The holy poets who developed the Enuma Elish furnished 50 names for Marduk, each a testament to his wisdom and virtue. They conclude their poem with the following command for mankind. Quote, "Let the names of Marduk be held in remembrances, and let the first man proclaim them. Let the wise and the understanding consider them together. Let the father repeat them and teach them to his son. Let them be in the ears of the pastor and the shepherd. Let the man rejoice in Marduk, the Lord of the gods, that he may cause his land to be fruitful, and that he himself may have prosperity." End quote. Implied in this command is mankind's forgetfulness and the need of a lodestar for guidance. This is a frequent refrain among the wisdom traditions. The Septuagint, to take but one example, speaks of wisdom as resplendent and unfading, and that taking thought of her is the perfection of prudence, and he who for her sake keeps vigil shall quickly be free from care. Nicholas Rostov's lodestar assumes a female personification as well. As we see in today's chapter, it is the recollection of his wife, Mary, that draws Nicholas from the chaotic waters of his own self back into a state of mental equanimity and tranquility. Remember that yesterday, Nicholas backslid into a fit of thoughtless rage at Pierre's silly idealism. Today, Nicholas repents, realizing his error. He is reminded by contemplation of his wife. Tolstoy writes, "Had Nicholas been able to analyze his feelings, he would have found that his steady, tender, and proud love of his wife rested on his feeling of wonder at her spirituality and at the lofty moral world, almost beyond his reach, in which she had her being. To remember himself, Nicholas must not forget Mary. He must carry her with him into the field he farms, into his study as he plans, and, most importantly, into the interactions he has with those who irritate him. If he does, Mary's watchful eye and guiding light will help keep him straight. This watchful eye can take the secularized form of a virtuous person like Mary, or even a higher being like Marduk. The point is to remember so that you do not forget. Daily meditation. If you always remember that whatever you are doing in the soul or in the body, God stands by you as an inspector, you will never err in all your prayers and in all your acts, but you will have God dwelling with you. Epictetus. Fragments of Epictetus. All right, so that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 348 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Also down there, you're also going to find links to my Amazon wishlist for books and movies. If you decide to support me by purchasing a book or a movie, that would be fantastic. I would really like it. And we'll set up a Zoom call or something to discuss that book or that movie. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 349 of War and Peace. I hope you join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.